Hi everyone, I hope you have been well and had a great weekend. I just got done watching Goof Family, book episode 5, and oh my gosh, I'm going to actually talk about my musings first and then do a short recap for you because there is just so much in this episode that I don't think I can just, do the recap justice. So I'm just going to give you brief overview of the episode. That way I know most of you will watch the actual episode. And if you don't, I would actually recommend that you do. This episode, I think it surpasses episode 2, which was just incredibly heart-wrenching. In episode 2, there was a lot of a little bit of comedy, but a lot of drama and some really great acting. Episode 5 is no different. Actually, I think it goes beyond. And this is the best episode yet. So, Maui, I know you were saying that it's good, but you hadn't quite found your crack drama for 2013. I think this is it. Oh my gosh. Episode 5. And Sarah, if you're watching this, thank you so much for coming on. But honestly, if you were hooked before episode 5, by episode 5, your husband and kids are going to think, Daddy, dear, what are you doing? What are you watching? It's that good. Let me go ahead and get started with my musings. What I really love, and excuse my hair, today is just one of those days, but what I really love about episode 5 is the fact that there's so many relationships, especially those centered around Yoru, because you know that Kwon, who is her companion and I guess guard in some respects, he's been commissioned by her father to really watch after her, help her in her investigations, and make sure that she's safe. Well, you see many instances of his jealousy arising. One when he goes on a mission, on an errand for Yoru to give Kangchi a medicine salve for his injury. And instead of saying, my mistress wants to say thank you, he curses at Kangchi saying, you jerk, you who will, give me nightmares or is just, a bad omen for 1,000 years or whatever. It's hilarious in Korean, so hopefully when you see it in English, they'll translate it, well enough for you. And then when Tessel, actually, we find out in today's episode that Tessel is well aware of who Yoru is. They've met before, and Kangchi actually thinks that Yoru is a guy. So he says to Kwon, tell your young master. But Tessel actually is aware that Yoru is actually a girl, and so he, welcomes her, warmly when he sees her, and he's like, "Why didn't you tell me you were staying at, our inn before? I would have, definitely made you feel welcome." And all throughout this exchange, you see Kwon, showing his jealousy and things like that. So, that's kind of the fun stuff because you see, I know Bentley, you see Yoru being the center of attraction with both men, Tessel, and I did warn you that I thought that there was going to be a love interest between Tessel and Yoru, and then of course Kwon showing his jealousy. Kangchi's still not getting it, but I have hope that he will. The other big thing though that I wanted to talk about is just how the episode is really tying in some incredibly huge story arcs. In Korean history, and I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know that much about Korean history, unfortunately, but one of the great generals or admirals of ancient or old Korean history is a man by the name of Lee Sun-shin. They've actually had a lot of dramas centered around him, and the reason why was he was the one who invented in Korean, naval, I guess, forces, the first boats that had guns on the side as a way to protect Korean waters from foreign invasion. And for those of you who know, Korea is this tiny little country, even more so now. South Korea, is half of what Korea used to be. And so it's a tiny little country. And back in that time period, Lee Sun-shin was the first one who recognized that there might be danger from outside of Korea. And so we see him actually making moves within episode 5 with Inspector Tam to really build up ancient Korea's arsenal and I guess in some respects start Korea's first navy. And Merchant Park is an instrumental part of that, which I think is incredibly awesome. It definitely gives the story a greater scope than just, the folklore of a kumio who falls in love with, a human, then gives birth to half kumio, half human, who then falls in love with. You guys get the point, right? The story has taken on much grander scope than I initially thought. And, I had mentioned in previous episodes that I really loved the great rootable characters. Episode 5, Merchant Park. I won't spoil it too much right now, but Merchant Park has always just stood his ground. I love the fact that he's extremely stoic. He is always about protecting his people, and he isn't afraid to ask questions if he is concerned about where certain things are going to be used and whatnot, regardless of whether there might be some offense taken and such. Because there's this great scene between Merchant Park, Inspector Tam, and then Lee Sun-shin, who has a certain governmental, position back then, and they come and ask Merchant Park for help, and Merchant Park says, if you are asking me for, monetary backing, I need to know what you want this money for, what I will in essence be financing. And Lee Sun-shin says, fine, I'll show you. And as he's unwrapping the plans for his big, huge Korean, I guess, warship, he doesn't look at the plans. He's always looking at Merchant Park's expression to see, is this a man that I can trust? What is this man's reaction going to be? And through it all, I mean, Merchant Park's response to that, he literally takes him in and says, you know what, anything I have here is yours, because if the Korean government won't finance you, and this is for the good of the nation, this is to protect Korean waters, I will put everything that I have behind your efforts. And so, in essence, historically, I don't know how true that is. Probably not. That fusion, like creative license part is here, but in essence, Merchant Park ends up in the context of the story, financing the building of these first, I guess, warships that Lee Sun-shin later uses to protect Korean waters. But anyway, so I don't know how else to explain this. Incredibly great. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to mention. The thing that I really loved about this episode was that there were some references to previous times. For example, Sojong ends up meeting Kang-chi for the first time, and he asks Kang-chi, because Kang-chi has no idea who Sojong is. I guess Sojong, for all these, 20 some odd years or 19 some odd years, had stayed far away from Kang-chi and not really let him know of his identity. Hold on, Bentley wants to go. He's so weird. He always insists on getting on my lap, and then as I start to film at around like 8 minutes or 10 minutes, he'll say, she's not going anywhere. I guess I'll get off her lap. Oh, Bentley. All right. Anyway, so going back to Sojong, he looks at Kang-chi's bracelet and he says, what is it now? You only have 10 days left before your 20th birthday. And Kang-chi just looks at him and he's like, actually, it's 11 days. And when he says that, Sojong flashes back to his last conversation, or one of his last conversations with Woryong. And Woryong had said, I only have 11 days left before I finish my 100-day, attempt to get that Crew family book in my hand so I can actually be fully human. Well, there was that reference, and then just a number of references, because you see Kang-chi literally reliving that horrific night or day when Woryong was killed and such. And so Kang-chi, episode 5 really kind of hints at that. The other illusion that I really love, though, is in the earlier part, Yeol, as she is being protected by Kang-chi, she flashes back to their earlier scene. And so when you look at my blog, my cover picture is of the child actors, because I thought that they deserved a little bit of a shout out. But they were so incredibly great. and cute. And that's how you find out that Yeol actually has a past relationship with Merchant Park's, inn and family, as well as the fact that that's where she has this, I guess, meeting with Kangchi, where number one, Kangchi saves her, and number two, she finds out that Kangchi is actually afraid of tarantulas. And I did find out Wang Komi actually is the name that they use for tarantulas. So, all right, I'm at 10 minutes, 30 seconds, so let me go ahead and give you a quick recap of what happened. In episode 5, the episode opens up again, very much similar to what we what we left off on episode 4, with Kangchi and Yeol facing the hallucinations or the doppelganger, soldiers or ninja people. And on the flip side, Merchant Park is now dealing with the secret ninja assassin that stupid Cho Kwon sent. Well, the great thing is, just as Merchant Park asks, "Who are you?" and the secret ninja guy is about to kill him, Merchant Park's head guard, security guard, comes in and stops the fatal blow. And what's incredible is that all throughout this entire sword exchange, Merchant Park doesn't even flinch. He's just seated there, and just incredible will or steel of nerves, I guess. Nerve of steel, is that it? But anyway. So they're fighting, and at the same time, Kangchi and Yeol are fighting, and both of them, take hits. And what I love about Yeol during this whole fighting sequence is that unlike Seowa, Yeol has much more worldly experience. She hasn't been sheltered and, living in this kind of structured and very cloistered noble woman's life the way Seowa has. And actually, when I think about Seowa, I think very much that she reminds me of Chongjo, and how these Kumio men, what is their problem? They pick the wrong girls to fall in love with, right? But anyway, Yeol's character, she is very worldly. She's aware of certain things, and she's aware of things that Kangchi doesn't even know. She is aware of the black magic that can be used. She's aware of, I guess, hallucinations or doppelganger, like ninjas that can pop up, and she knows that you vanish them by killing them, and they, poof, vanish into thin air. But she also knows that if they end up hurting you, you can get hurt. And it's just, she's the one teaching Kangchi, which I really think is great, because that she can hold her own. Well, in the midst of this fighting, what happens is, the soldier is about to actually come at her, and Kangchi steps in, and he gets pierced, with the sword on his forearm right here, right? And, Yeol's character's like, she's stunned, and she's like, Kangchi. And it flashes us back to when they were little, and how she had been playing in the woods when she and her father had visited Merchant Park's inn. And this big, huge dog or a wolf had come growling at her, and Kangchi had interceded, saying, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be by your side to protect you." And then when the dog actually tries to attack, Kangchi puts himself between her and the dog ends up literally biting her, biting his forearm, right? Well, this scene flashes her back to that, and the irony is that Kangchi just looks at it, the assailant, and he says, "Gotcha. I finally figured out that you're the real guy." Because previously Yeol had said, because Kangchi kept saying, "Oh my gosh, how are we going to fight this, all these people? It's like endless." And Yeol had just said, "We only need to fight one. We only need to find one, the real human behind all of these doppelgangers." And so when Kangchi gets pierced in the forearm, he smiles and he's like, "Gotcha, I found you." But anyway, so they're able to capture that guy. They bring him back to Merchant Park's place, and it turns out that Merchant Park is, his men are fighting the one, chief, Cho Kwon-ung's, bad guy, and the guy disappears by throwing like an explosive, and then he vanishes, right? In the aftermath of the explosion. Well, what I loved about the camera sequencing is that there were the episode did just such a really great job of flashing back between the two fight sequences and showing similarities and things like that. But anyway, so Merchant Park eventually then has a debriefing with his head security guy and Taeseo, and they learn that even though the head security guy had lost, Merchant Park's assassin or attempted assassin, Oh, Bentley must be hungry. Anyway, let me quickly finish. They learn that Kangchi has actually caught one of the other men, and so they try to question him, and the guy, of course, is silent. And Kangchi, showing how great of a memory he has, he says, "I know who this guy is." And then he kneels down. He says to him, "You're Chogonung's guy, huh? Aren't you? You were one of the three who decided that you were going to pit your strength against me the last time we met, and tried to unarm me or kill me." And of course, that's correct. And so anyway, that's resolved, and they decide to hold on to the guy. And instead of reporting this to the authorities as they should have, Merchant Park and Tessel decide that out of deference for Cho Kwon-eun's previous, positions and his place in society, that Tessel said that he would go and meet with Cho Kwon-eun and issue a warning saying, "You better come and apologize to my father for this gross, offense and all of this." Well, Cho Kwon-eun in the meantime has had the debriefing from his little chief ninja assassin. He's like, it looks like the time has come for me to make my move. And when Tezel comes to visit him, Cho Kwon-eun says, "How dare you, ill-mannered, bastard son," or whatever. I don't think he says that, but anyway, you guys know what I mean. So Cho Kwon-eun, what he does is he conspires to, he basically tells the, I guess, head magistrate in that little village that someone that he had sent as a spy to investigate a murder from 2 years ago has disappeared, and hasn't been, heard from in a few days. And he then says, "I suspect Merchant Park," and that the body is being, or the man is being held somewhere in the inn. And so the merchant, not the merchant, but the investigator, despite his hesitancy of barging into the inn, decide that he is, especially when Cho Kwon-eun, the big headhunter guy, has told him. Now, one of the things that some of you may have very difficult time understanding is that Korean culture back then, as to some extent it is now, not as much, but Korean culture back then was it was literally a feudal system. And so based on what you wore and your position, there was a lot of leverage that you can wield. And that's also one of the reasons why Kangchi, when he sees Yeol, thinks that she is a guy, because she's dressed up as a guy. There's no reason for him to actually think that she could be a girl, which goes back to the whole hallucination thing that he had when they were running away from his, inn's guards, where he thinks it's Chongjo. It never dawns on him, at least now, that Yeol could have been the one to save him, because as far as he's concerned, Yeol is a guy. Well, anyway, so the investigator decides to go barging into the house. Well, incidentally, at that time, it coincides with Chongjo's betrothal happening. And, in Korean culture, they have this thing where the groom, the groom-to-be, his family and friends come to sell what's called a ham. It sounds like ham, but it's a shorter A, so ham. And the bride's family and servants then try to buy it, and then they come and they present what I guess in some respects is like a dowry. And then once it's been accepted, it's pretty much a done deal that the marriage is going to happen. Well, anyway, that moment coincides with the barging of the guards, and of course, when they put the hum down on the table, it breaks, signifying kind of a bad omen and things like that. Now, freeze frame here for a minute. What I forgot to tell you was, after the fights, fight scenes and such, Yeol had come back and she was dressing her wounds, and Kwon is like kind of stunned because he sees her kind of in a state of undress, I guess. And so he quickly turns around, and at the time she asks, "Hey, so what did he think when you gave him the medicine, and when I said thank you, or when you delivered the message that I thank you?" And then, we flip back to Kwon giving the, medicine salve to Kangchi as he's being treated by his father, howling like a little crybaby. And, Kangchi looks at it and he's like, "Oh, this is weird. How come your master is acting like a little girl, giving me like medicine like this?" And then when he tries to when Kwon says, "Fine, then I'll take it back," Kangchi's like, "No, I don't want to, hey, don't be, such a take-backer, I want to use this, right?" And Gon doesn't even deliver the message of, oh, my master or mistress says thank you. He just says, you make my stomach turn for 1,000 years, you whatever. And then, they just have really bad ill. And so as he turns to leave, Kangchi has to be held back by his father and his, servant friends, from going to attack Kwon. Well, Kwon thinks back and he's like, yeah, I kind of did. And so she's like, what? And so what did Kangchi say when you gave him the medicine and I said thank you? And he's like, he said nothing. And so Yo was like, what kind of a jerk? He said nothing after I said that and I sent him the medicine salve, right? Well, later that evening, what happens is Chongju hears about Kangchi being hurt, and so she rushes out. And Kangchi at the time was sitting on a bench, and he was looking at the medicine cell, kind of thinking, "Oh, what a nice guy, to have sent me medicine cell." Well, he puts that aside as soon as Chongju comes in, and then that's when Chongju says the dialogue that I translated for the spoiler for episode 5, saying, "How could I leave you behind and get married? How can I live without you, right?" And she says, "I wish that I could just disappear from the face of the earth, and just, because this is such a great moment or something. After this moment, I wish I could just disappear from the face of the earth." And so Kangchi says, if you want to, I'll disappear with you. I'll, die with you or whatever. He's just tell me what you want and I'll do it. And Chongju just looks at him and she says, will you be able to betray my father? Will you be able to betray my brother and my family? And she's like, no, you can't. You can't betray them any more than I would be able to betray them. And she's like, just forget what I said. I've heard that sometimes a woman right before her wedding tends to think some silly thoughts and say silly thoughts. So just pretend that this never happened. And she leaves. And Kangchi's just left thinking, oh my gosh, you were hugging me just a moment ago and you were saying all these incredibly romantic things and now you're just leaving, right? Well, Yoru sees them embracing and then she turns away trying to, tell herself, snap out of it. All right, so everyone good, right? All right, so going back, what happens is the investigator storms the house and then they search all over the place, and one of the guards finds a little missive that Inspector Tam had given, Merchant Park. And so he brings it up and then Cho Gun-eun says, oh, so you're part of a secret, cult or whatever, secret group. Apprehend these guys. Take Merchant Park and Tessalt, right? Well, into the scene then, Chongjo comes and the mom comes, to find out what's going on. And then Cho Gun-eun, of course, looks at Chongjo and he's like, oh, so creepy, right? So he kind of leans forward to Merchant Park and he says, hey, don't worry. Once the inn has been sold, I will comfort your daughter every night. Implying, of course, that she's going to be sold into a brothel and then Cho Gun-eun is going to, rape her. And it's so disgusting because he's now her grandfather's age. Have you guys thought about that? Right? Oh. Anyway, so Merchant Park gets upset, but before he can even say anything, and this is supposed to be a direct allusion back to what Cho Gun-eun had done to his old friend, Lord Yun, right? With Seo and stuff. But before any of this can happen, Kangchi bursts into the scene and he says, under whose authority are you going to be able to do this? And then he threatens, and he unmans and, basically pulls rank and stuff, right? Well, one thing leads to another. Cho Gun-eun sends his chief henchman to, deal with Kangchi, and Kangchi unarms him, and then he's got his hand literally across his throat. And when the guy who had, done the doppelganger and had tried to kill Kangchi in that first fight realizes that his senior, ninja guy, isn't able to kill Kangchi, he takes one of the other guards' swords and he then attempts to ram it through to Kangchi's stomach, right? Well, Merchant Park sees this and he runs right in front of Kangchi and ends up getting the bulk of the long sword. And so the episode ends with Merchant Park literally dying in Kangchi's arms, and Kangchi is like saying, please wake up. Tell me this isn't happening, and everyone's stunned. And Merchant Park, with his last dying breath, says to Kangchi, no matter what anyone says, you have always been like a son to me. Take care of Tessal and Chongjo. I leave them in your care, right? And, he says that with his last dying breath, and you're just kind of like, oh. And then Kangchi turns and he looks at Cho Kwon-woong and he's like, I am going to kill you. And then his eyes flash that green kumyo thing. And while this is going on, there is supernatural, waves and things like that, right? And that's how the episode ends. What I forgot to mention, though, is earlier on in the episode, Sojong had gone to visit the inn, and he kind of jokingly meets up with Kang Chen. He says, "Oh, I'm here because I heard that this inn had some really great meals, and so I'm here for a lunch." And Kang Chi's like, "Oh, well, do we know each other?" And that's how they talked about the 11 days left and things like that, right? Well, Sojong tells him that, and he kind of tells him, between sundown today and sunrise tomorrow morning, do not, he says, vacate this inn. Do not step foot into this inn, because there are some really weird things that are moving around. And he says that this was the same type of vibe that I felt 20 years ago, right? And so Kang Chi's like, what? Who are you? Do you know me? And, Sojong doesn't really let on. He just looks at his bracelet and he's like, remember what I said, okay? Take care of yourself. Don't step foot into this inn between sunset today and sunrise tomorrow morning. And then as he leaves, he says Kang Chi. And Kang Chi is like thrown, because he's like, how does this man know who I am, right? And of course, he can't find Sojong. Well, while all of this ruckus with the guards and Cho Kwon-woong and Merchant Park about to die and all of this goes on, we see Sojong literally outside the inn, like urging silently Kang Chi to leave the inn, saying, come on, Kang Chi, leave the inn. And of course, when Kang Chi learns about all the ruckus that's going on, he's about to follow his father, but he hears Sojong's voice saying, Chagang Chi. And then he remembers that, the guy had warned him, don't set foot into the inn. Well, we know his loyalty to the family and his sense of justice compels him to go and take care of that, and literally all chaos breaks loose. So anyway, that was episode 5. I am sorry that I left out so many great parts, and I hope that this made sense. I was going through very quickly, but anyway, that is it. So thanks for watching this video or listening to this video, and I will see you tomorrow for episode 6. We are moving definitely into, so for those of you who don't want to know what episode 6 is about, you can stop here. But episode 6, we see Kang Chi actually moving back into his father's little garden haven, and Merchant Park, of course, is dead. Mrs. Park and Pesol and Chongjo are now in like these prison crates, and Kang Chi goes there and promises them, I will protect you. Somehow I will protect you. And so I'm just waiting for Cho Kwon-woong to get his comeuppance. I wanted to. Oh, anyway, that's it. Bye, everyone.